Thank you all so much for joining us. This is actually quite an honor for me. I'm both a huge fan of the show and grew up listening to the DiC version when I was just a little elementary school boy. So I know all your voices, I know all your music. I'm just as much a fan as they are. So why don't we just go down the line and tell us a little bit about how you got started with the music industry and music in general.
Okay, I'm originally from California. I live in Nashville now, but I lived back in North Hollywood and was doing a lot of singing, different types of singing for Disney, and I lived in Japan for a while. And I had an agent that called me to come audition for this project. I was also working, doing a show called Roundhouse 2 at the time, so maybe some of you guys know what Roundhouse was, but I did the project and kind of went on with my singing career, moved to Nashville. So that's how I kind of got Sailor Moon.
Well, I got started in the music business actually playing in a band with John. I was a guitar player.
I don't recall that at all.
So we, the band didn't quite go anywhere, as unfortunately we hoped. But we actually
played lots of places.
We played a lot of places, but it was what it was. But we ended up kind of keeping the partnership going on that, and we ended up starting doing music for commercials and various other things. And eventually, it branched out, and I had contacted DiC at one point and kind of opened the door, and we ended up doing this job. So it was a lot of fun.
I grew up in South Florida, and I grew up playing classical piano. But I knew that I would rather do something kind of more behind the scenes than perform. And I kind of got into songwriting when I got to college. I actually went to college at Middle Tennessee State in Nashville. And then I just wanted to continue writing, so I moved to LA. And Michael and I had a mutual friend that I was working with doing some other music writing and composing. And so, Michael, I think you actually are really responsible for me having a songwriting career at all. Seriously, you are, because he kind of invited us to be a part of a couple of projects that DiC was doing, and this was one of them. And we ended up getting to write some songs together too. We wrote Who Do You Think You Are, that Jennifer and I got to battle it out with, which was a really fun song to do with her. And a couple other ones, one that I'll get to do tonight, Nothing to Worry About, or Nothing at All, it's really the title. So, but yeah, and then I went on to write a few more songs, different songs from that show, and then some other shows, Inside for Living, Focus on the Family, and things like that. But yeah, Sailor Moon is a special memory. So anyway, that's my story.
My name's John Author, and Michael and I, we had a company called Music Kitchen. And like he said, we had started off playing in a band together. We actually met when I was attending school at Pepperdine University, and he was at UCLA. And so you're a year older than me? You're a year ahead of me. Yeah, so we met when I was I think it was the summer of my freshman year. So you would have been a sophomore. And so we got to know each other then. And then, one thing led to another. We played in the band together, and then we went off and did some different things. And then a few years later, we started doing some songwriting to try to get songs placed, because back then you could actually write songs and try to sell them to artists and stuff like that. So that's how we got started. But then we started developing things like writing music for commercials. We've actually scored a couple of movies that no one's ever heard about. And
did some Apple commercials too.
Yeah, we did some Apple computer commercials, because I was working at an ad agency. So I've been working as an ad agency producer for a number of years, and that's how I got connected into doing music. It's been a good 25 years since we've all been together, so this is a real treat.
I come from Santa Monica, California originally, and I have been singing and playing guitar and performing and writing music for over 45 years professionally now. It's been my life, and I love it. And I think my earliest inspiration, believe it or not, was Shirley Temple. And the reason I think that is because my first stage appearance was as a singing tap dancer with a bunch of flapper girls at like 8 years old. And then I went on to do a USO show tours, my first real professional gig when I was 17. And we toured the Orient, and I came back and I was hooked after that on singing and writing songs and performing, and I made my living playing in nightclubs and stuff until Disney heard me somewhere, like at the Palomino Club in Santa Monica, in North Hollywood. And so I started writing music for Disney, and that resulted in 3 platinum albums, and I got to sing in a bunch of TV shows for Mike Post because he was involved at the time. And then I wound up getting a song covered by an artist named Tiffany, and a song called Could Have Been went to #1 for 2 weeks, and Carrie Underwood covered that on American Idol, and it kind of was her debut. So I was happy to be a part of inspiring the young women of the world to come forward and be powerful. And today we have Wonder Woman out there kicking butt, right? And so, anyway, I might have just covered all those questions in one. I don't know, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So for all the composers and writers and songwriters on the panel here, were there any kind of requirements or inspirations or expectations by DiC, by the producers, for the kind of songs they wanted for the show?
There was different themes for different shows, and sometimes we had to watch the footage and find out what was going on exactly. I think there was one sort of mysterious one, and so it was kind of moody, and it was a lot of weather events going on, so we wound up writing Rainy Day Man, which was one of my favorites for that one. And then I think another one needed to be inspiring, so we wrote It's a New Day for that.
We didn't really get a lot of direction from DiC. It was kind of like, here's a video, watch it and come up with some ideas, and then we would present them to the executive music producer. I think we presented a few, and they came back and said, no, try again. So, but eventually we kind of, by getting the idea of what they want and kind of watching the show a lot too, which I know I got hooked on it. So eventually we kind of, honed it down. We figured out what they wanted for each song, and we would come up with the ideas.
If I remember the process correctly, the way it happened was we would actually get a VHS tape. It was VHS back then. And we would watch the show. And they would say that they wanted a song that was part of the story. And then we would come up with things. And initially, I don't know if people know this, but initially the songs are really short. They were like 90 seconds long at the most. So this was quite a bit of time afterwards where we had done a bunch of songs already and the show got really popular. We had to actually like kind of reproduce them. We had to write more lyrics even to make them, 3.5 minutes long.
Yeah, I played all the guitars, well not all the guitars, but a lot of them, and a lot of the keyboards and things too. And then occasionally, if I didn't have time or I didn't come up with something I liked, I hired some friends.
Could you talk a little bit about the recording? What were your feelings when you went in? What did the songwriters give you for inspiration to make the voices of Sailor Moon and Sailor Mars? And also, Lois, for you, did you ever get to work or meet Patricia and Shandy?
I remember going to your house, Michael, and I was singing in a closet. Because it was a home studio. It was an actual closet. And so we didn't really see much of the footage. They hadn't really done the English dubbing to it. They showed us, we knew what it looked like, and of course Michael and John would give us like, okay, sound younger, sing straighter, no vibrato. They just gave us good direction on that, and then we would comp the vocal probably, right? Which means I would take many passes, and then they would splice it together and make it the best pass. Some of them I did sing more the whole song, and they took it from that, but really, DiC, it was really us. DiC wasn't really so much, they weren't in the room. I don't remember them being there.
One thing you learn as a producer is that you always want to get the very first take, just give their best performance. So you always want to get that one. And then you want to go back and get other takes, and then a lot of times in the end, the comp, it might be 80% of that first take, and then you just went back and fixed little things here and there, a couple words or something. So that was also a crucial thing. You want to be rolling before while you're rehearsing, so you didn't miss that first one. Because a lot of the magic things might have been even a little, you weren't quite sure about the note, and they just did something really cool, and you were like, yes.
We got to have a little bit of freedom, like, little licks here, not much. They didn't want a lot of that. We laughed a lot because you're like, oh, we'll keep that in. And so it was really fun. We had a great time doing it.
I guess I did a lot of the background vocals, but yeah, the background vocals were always really fun. just stacking them, just doing lots of different ones over and over again. So it's just a lot of, the same person, but it ends up sounding like a big group of girls. Sometimes we would do it where I try to sound like a different person on each take so that it makes it sound fatter, like more people. And I also really like to listen to the character, so I did the singing voice of Sailor Mars. So it was really fun because we would try to look at the show and listen to how the voice of the girl that did the original sounded. Kind of like, well, if she were singing, what would she sound like? And try to kind of imitate that. So that I always thought was really fun. I did that on other shows, and I always have to find people that matched the voices. Sometimes it was easy to do, and sometimes it was really hard. But it was always really fun.
I really wanted to sing on the record, but I didn't sound young enough, because they wanted someone who sounded like 12, as I recall, and I was kind of a rock singer at the time, and sounding 12 was not my forte. And so one of the women in my band at the time actually did sing really young, Shandy Cinnamon. It was fun music, and I'm really glad you made that comment about grabbing the first take with a singer. Get the first take, because sometimes that's when you nail it. It's the freshest, so. As you said that. I remember Michael the most. I do remember meeting you. We met, it was just ever so briefly.
Yeah, me and Sandy sang together on a couple of different songs, and we had a blast. We always had fun in the studio. I never met any of the singers at all. I just knew the producers.
I do remember singing in the closet, though.
Maybe we should explain that. It sounds kind of strange if you're not someone who does a lot of recording, but it just, with all the clothes in there, it just deadens the sound. So if there's not like a studio where there's like a soundproofing, you can go in the closet and all the material just kind of deadens the sound, and the neighbors don't go, "What are you singing over and over and over and over again?" So that's why.
Also, did you ever meet any of the voice actors or any of the people from Japan who actually put the show together?
We didn't meet anybody. No one. I mean, we never met any of the voice actors, for sure. I remember going to DiC office maybe twice, maybe to just sign some paperwork. And that was really about it. I mean, Michael and I, the music company was called Music Kitchen, which Michael still owns. But the Music Kitchen was basically a home studio that we worked out of, and we were doing gigs, like we were writing music for workout videos, commercials, we were doing songwriting, and when we got this gig with DiC, it was just another thing. We didn't really even think about it. I mean, we just did it because it was a job. And it's funny when you think about the way things were and the way things are now, it's like a lot of home studio recordings are exactly the same way that we worked back then. I mean, we just used an extra bedroom to set up our studio. All the gear was in there, the guitars and the keyboards and computer, and we had a closet, and we used that as an ISO booth, and that was it. I mean, I don't recall meeting anybody other than Karen from DiC. Yeah.
I have met the Linda Valentine, who's the third Sailor Moon voice actress, Toby Proctor's Tuxedo Mask, and then some Susan Roman, one of the Sailor Scouts, and Katie. I met their Canadian voiceover people, and I did meet them at a con or a thing a couple years ago, and they didn't know about us either. They were kind of like, we're kind of separated actually, because so many fans love the speaking and of course the characters, but it seems like the music, people really fall apart for the music. Like anytime I've done another convention, I have these girls coming up to me crying, like, my only love, like, that's my childhood. They always say, that's my childhood. So I want to tell you guys that these songs are still living very strong, and people are really affected by them. So I hear this, and you guys didn't know what your great contribution to the show was. So
next Saturday night, we'll be at the Levitt Pavilion opening for Perla Battaglia. I'm currently doing that. I have a 5-piece band. My husband and daughter are in the band, and we're really excited about that. It's a free concert, you guys. It's going to be a great show, so come to that. I'm writing songs for television shows and other people's records and my records, and my husband and I are producing our daughter Jennifer McNeil over there, and she's fabulous.
What am I doing? I'm not doing anything. Actually, I've always kind of been going back and forth between music production and commercial production. So I've been working over the last 15 years or so at different advertising agencies producing television commercials. And I've written for some of those spots. I worked on ads for McDonald's. A couple of years ago, I got to actually go out to China to go shoot a commercial for Walmart, so that was kind of cool. Currently, what I'm doing now is I'm doing a lot of post-production work for different companies. And I'm also part of a startup. It's called We The Project, wetheproject.com. And it's a media production platform for people who want to make things like you want to shoot a movie, or you want to do a short film, or you want to record an album. So it's a way for people to find other like-minded people. Let's say you're a director, you need actors, or you're a writer, you need a producer, you're a composer, and you're looking for musicians. So it's a way for people to kind of like connect. So we're trying to launch that in the next couple of months or so. We're looking for financial assistance right now. We're developing our presentation. So I'm really excited about that. It's a really very different chapter that I'm moving into. But, music has always been my first love, and I'm actually trying to get back into doing a bit more writing. And who knows, maybe after this, I'll take some of these old songs and maybe I'll do an arrangement or two just to have fun. Because, the stuff that Bobbie's done has been fantastic. When I heard it, I was blown away. I was just like, this is amazing. Taking those songs and putting them in an orchestral arrangement, and they work. They really, really work. So, I'm very happy to be part of this process, and thanks for inviting us, and looking forward to listening to your music.
So right now, for me, the main thing that I'm doing, I lead the worship and music, the choir and the band at my church. It's called Living Oaks Church. It's out in Thousand Oaks and Newbury Park, technically. And so I'm there weekly. Recent recording, I got to sing, which was really cool, at Capitol Records for Richard Sherman, who was one of the Sherman brothers that wrote all the songs for Mary Poppins. There was a song that they had written for Mary Poppins that didn't actually make it into the film. And there's a really interesting story that you can find out about all of that. But they were really crushed because they thought it was going to be the big, epic song. And so nothing ever happened with it. It just got shelved, like all these years. And then just recently they were making an album. And I just happened to know the producer, and he knew that I knew the story. And I told him the story ahead of all of this. And he said, I want you to sing it. And I was like, what? So it was really exciting. So I got to sing that song, that special song of theirs. And there's another show that I wrote a lot of songs for. I think Michael and I actually wrote one of the songs for it too, for Insight for Living. It's called Paws and Tales. It's a radio show. It's a little bit on the TV now too, on the TV. On the TV. But yeah, on the YouTube. But I guess they're going to take this show now and they're going to translate it into Spanish. So they're looking to take some of the songs that I've written and translate them. So I think that's really cool. So I'm going to be helping them work on that. So that's my next project.
These days, I actually have a production music library. It's called Audio Addiction Music. And a production music library is it's like a music library that we place music in TV shows and movies and various other productions. And I've been doing this for about 10 years, so that's kind of my main musical focus these days.
I live in Nashville, like I said earlier, and I do a lot of live singing there with lots of different bands, and I'm actually trying to start auditioning to go back to my old school roots of doing musical theater again, because I feel like I've done every other type of music and that I love, and I want to get back to like being the kooky character role. I used to try to be like the Dorothys and the Bells of the world, and I should have been a Little Mermaid, but I was not the Little Mermaid. I always loved the Little Mermaid. No. Anywho, so I am still doing some Sailor Moon stuff. I do cons here and there, and this wonderful project, Bobbie's become a good friend of mine, and you will not be disappointed by the show that you're about to witness. It's very wonderful. And thank you for having all of us, and Sailor Moon bringing us all together. It's so fabulous.
Yeah, it's quite an honor to have you all here. I'm, as a fan, as a musician, as a conductor, this is just flabbergastingly wonderful. Because I know that I used to listen to these songs and cry to them in my little room at midnight. So I'm as much inspired by what you've created, your lyrics, your music, your singing, to even start doing this arrangement and to incorporate a lot of the American English dub songs. So thank you so much. Let's give them a big round of applause. Really such wonderful music.